Welcome to the Uncommon Truth. Today, Bob and I are joined by our guest host, Irwin Ki from San Francisco, California. What, though, can we give to our audience here today that's practical? In other words, what are some of our processes? Let's share some story and actually do to build that rapport and to aid people in the actual execution of it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. Bob, if you want to jump ahead, like by all means. I think because I was waiting for this, which was sales process. Because I think as a listener, when I'm listening in, there's a lot of interesting things. And we talked about rapport. We talked about coming from intention. We talked about asking questions. But every scalable and high growth sales company needs a sales process. And that was what's missing in this entire conversation, is because there isn't a lack of process, or we haven't discussed process. And God, I mean, that's like a whole training in its own right. But what you want to do, because every sales company and division and product is very different. There are simple sales processes, like let's assume you're selling to one individual, all right? So it's very prospecting, get the meeting, qualification, qualify the needs, and then close, negotiate and close, right? That's a very simple sales process. Now, if you're talking about what Bob had to go through, which is a multi-layer B2B enterprise sales, that's another huge training in a nutshell, but it's the same thing. It's profiting, finding how can you get that meeting with the right individual buyer. When you're on that meeting, how do you build rapport and quickly show your expertise and qualify? I consider that the first call is the qualification space. You need to qualify, and then you want to have a next step. Most technology companies, you need to have some sort of pain, and there's a whole sales process around how to qualify, right? In our business, we have MEDIC or BANT. So BANT is budget, authority, need, timeline. MEDIC is metrics, economic buyer, decision process, decision criteria, identify pain, champion, and competition. And my belief personally is, out of all the qualities that I just mentioned, BANT and MEDIC, the most important, actually, maybe we can kind of round robin this. It's difficult without the visuals of what MEDIC is. But the key thing is, I personally believe that after doing years and years of sales training, it boils, the most important qualification piece in all the different attributes I just mentioned is the champion. It's all about finding the champion. So Bob just mentioned, hey, I have 3 people I need to talk to. So what he's doing is he's building champions within the organization. He's finding this person, level 1, may be the champion. And what is a champion? A champion is someone who's going to fight for you when you're not in the room. That's it. They have power and influence, and they fight for you when you're in the room. So I believe personally in the whole sales process, it's all about building the champion. At the end of the day, what we're talking about, building rapport, finding needs, it's all about that champion and how to build that person. And I think most young people don't have a process or to realize, is this a champion or are they a coach? Are they a coach or are they a saboteur? And people a lot of times think that they're selling to the champion when in reality they have no power. They have no ability to make any decision or loop in their decision makers. I don't know I can go on a rant on this because there's I'm trying to condense a decade worth of sales information into a nutshell, right? Without having to spend the entire call doing this, so we could go long. But the sales process.
I'm really enjoying, Irwin. I'm really enjoying the rant. This is really great information. So you got some more stuff you want. You keep going. This is gold. This is gold for a person listening to this right now, and for them to understand a little bit of that process. Like when you're starting to talk to a person, like we have to turn them, in your word, into a champion. Like maybe some hints on that. Like how do you recognize what the questions you might ask to figure out if they have simply.
It's easy.
Basic question.
Doing so many forecast calls after closing so many deals, and now coaching. I had a friend of mine who I'm helping him with his deal with Microsoft right now. And he's like, Irwin, I told him everything I'm teaching is champion-based selling. which is, first is identifying the champion. Who do I think the champion is? Getting the meeting. Then you're selling, right? Why you're the expert, why, what problems. And he's stuck with the deal in Microsoft. And I'm like, here's the number one thing that no sales training is teaching, which is you need to test your champion. And he's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, again, the definition of a champion is a person who fights for you, who has power and influence, and they fight for you when you're not in the room. Because again, that's how deals are done. When the door closes, you leave. They're going to decide whether or not they're going to buy, and they need to fight for you. And if you don't have a champion, they're just saying in our business, if you don't have a champion, you don't have a deal. So many people in sales think it's about the features and benefits, but they don't focus on what you're really doing is you're building a champion. And then how you realize what a real, like if you have a champion is you need to test them, which means you need to ask them to do something for you. So it's either, hey, you need to go get permission to go do a trial. Hey, who other people, is it a committee? Is there a boss, or a manager that needs to make a decision? Can you get them a meeting with us? Because that's the test. Is if they can't fight for you and they can't get you that other additional decision maker in the meeting, so that you have another chance to build another champion, you don't really have a champion. And when he can't even do that, or he or she can't do that, you don't have a deal. So you don't spend time wasting time chasing deals that don't exist. And it's a dance. Your job is to, again, build a rapport, build the champion, and then test it. That's the sales process. If I had to simplify a whole huge sales process, it's simply that. And then we go into execution phase, which is like, okay, now you're asking for the meeting, but how do you know what to ask for? And that's why there's different frameworks to create different questions, so that when you're in a meeting with somebody, you're not just asking questions about, their family, which is great, right? Those are great rapport, but you can build rapport quickly by showing your expertise and showing that they have pain. And the minute you have the rapport, you don't need to focus on rapport building, but what you need to focus on is building the business case. And there's a whole framework for that. So when I think of non-complex sales, it's simply BANT, B-A-N-T. So do they have budget? Authority. Authority is another fancy word for champion. N is the need, and then timeline. It's just a year from now, 2 years from now. That's very simplistic, right? I personally believe that, my sales process is something called pin selling, P-I-N-N. Think of a grenade pin. If I had to summarize all the enterprise, how to sell into big companies in a nutshell, it's top-down problems, initiatives, needs, and needs. So in order for a business, if you think about a company like Apple, right, for them to buy something or buy a service, they got to have some sort of corporate problem, which can be figured out from reading their 10K or annual reports. From there, after they have a problem, they're going to create some sort of initiative. And then from there, the people underneath the department is going to have to find a technical need. They're going to, in my space, the software tech space, they're going to find a need that's going to require a technical solution. And those solutions are going to have to solve a personal need. So PIN. So I look at it from that framework as in, okay, so when I speak with someone, how can I draw in? And what we're essentially doing is we're asking different questions to figure out what are the ways that we can attach our service or software to their corporate initiative, because those big companies just don't do deals without some sort of overarching corporate wave or momentum that is going towards. So that's my personal thing that I teach is, PIN process. And whenever it gets so complex, so let's say we're 3 months into a sales cycle, and I'm with my manager, and we're like, what's going on with the deal? Well, what we do is we call the MEDDIC, MEDDICC. So it's metrics. So in the sales process, you want to find out what are the metrics, what are the different, it could be time savings, it could be dollar savings. What are the metrics in deal? And those are some of the questions that you can ask to generate how you can find more pain. Then we go into E, which is your economic buyer. So the economic buyer is different than the champion a lot of the times. These are the people who finally signs the check. Could be the CFO, could be the CEO, that could be the president of the company. but it's important to distinguish that. And a lot of times sales professionals don't even get to the economic buyer. Then you have the decision process. So how do they make a decision? Is it a committee? Is there a boss involved? What are the, and then so that's the, so my secret sauce on how to find the D is asking your champion, can you walk me backwards from a purchase order being signed? What are the things that need to happen? Okay, we need to go through red line, it's the agreement. Before that, we need to negotiate pricing. Who negotiates pricing is probably this director, right? So how do you guys price it out? When do we do pricing conversation? Well, what happens before that? Well, we need to get the thumbs up on the project. So how do we do that? Well, there's an IT committee meeting, right? And then what do we do for that? It's like, so then what you do is you start mapping out all the steps in the deal with your champion from end to going backwards to where you are today. And then that's how these big contracts get done on time, is because they're able to mitigate the risk and set up the necessary meetings through understanding how the business buys anything. So that's MEDD, so decision criteria. Every company, when they buy something, they're going to have some sort of like requirements. It could be security requirements. It could be, these features or functions that I think is really important. You got to figure out what are the needs versus the wants. And then you want to identify pain. We talk about pain a lot. So that's the I. C is the most important thing, which is champion and testing the champion. And then finally, C again is your competitor. A lot of mistakes that, and I think rookie salespeople, is they don't ask, what are the alternatives, because they're just afraid to. And when you understand what they're looking at, you kind of understand what is the status quo, or what are you being compared against. And that way you can also ask, what do you like about it? And then you start distinguishing what are the things that they value, which is their needs. And you have an opportunity to sell around that and position your solution or your offering or your messaging around what they care about. So when I think of sales process, that's why it's like I'm trying to condense decades of sales training into a 20-minute conversation. But there are frameworks that you can add in your knowledge, so that when you're talking to a customer, what it does is it goes back and okay, I haven't asked a question about their process. I haven't asked a question about their competition. And it's when you're in the moment with a customer, you sometimes lose sense of time and lose sense of it's like sometimes selling in the middle of selling, it's an adrenaline rush. You are on peak state. You need to be so present to the customer that you forget all these different things that you need to ask. And having a framework helps create some structure to make sure that, oh man, I forgot to ask about this, forgot about it. That way you have an opportunity to de-risk your deal or to help build a champion, build a business case. And that's what I love about the business, is or learning, that's what I love about doing it, is actually taking that conceptual framework and actually being able to replicate it again and again and again. And that's how you are consistently being able to create that confidence. Like, oh my God, every time I pick up the phone, I'm dialing for dollars, because I know that this framework can reduce my time wasted, it'll reduce my customer's time wasted, and I can consistently map out a deal with my customer. And that's, if you want to continue. So I share with you the qualification stage, but now we go into how to drive the deal, which is, I use a framework called a mutual action plan, called a MAP. So if Bob, you and I were trying to do a deal, I would ask you, okay, let's assume that you're excited about it. You like the business case. And I ask you, walking backwards, how do you get a deal done? What you're doing in that case is, if they're willing to tell you all the different steps, what you want to then do is create that mutual action plan, because very complex sales, you need to have all these different meetings, and it could have different resources that the company has, and also your company needs to produce to make sure all the steps are set up at the right time. And creating a new mutual action plan, it was an eye-opening experience when I first saw it, as a new salesperson. It's like, oh my God, you are essentially working with your customer to create all the different complex sales lined up date by date with people on there, and you're controlling your destiny. And that's driving the deal, is learning. I remember, as a mistake as a salesperson, is people would sell, and then people don't know how to actually close a meeting. They don't know how to close the next steps. And creating a map, a mutual action plan, is a great way to help people, guide people together. So we're doing this as a project together versus me forcing a set of meetings down your throat that you don't really see what's the point of. And then we go into negotiate and close, which is, another, there's so many game theory and different sales trainings and things around like, how do you present your pricing? How do you create different offerings to get the incentives that you want? And I think that's what people hate about salespeople is a lot of times in first calls, like, well, what's the price? Well, great sales professionals won't really show pricing until they build value up. So they they kick it down the can. And then when they do present pricing, they build so much value that they're like, they're sometimes charging an arm and a leg for it. But there's different strategies on how to present pricing to get what everybody wants. It could be adding additional, Anyways, I can keep
a matter of price, right? It should be a matter of value, right? To the place where it's not if they can afford it, it's because they can't afford not to, in that aspect. So one of the I think that I can see already here, and I'm so grateful for our time today, is that we need to almost make a series out of this. And I'll be talking to you more about that and how we could actually create some niche topics and resolve some of these needs that people have in communication and in the ability to help them in the sales of life, because it's not just about work. Every day we're selling, whether we're talking to our wife, whether we're talking to our children, whether we're talking to our friends about, we're going for a motorbike ride. Well, where are we going? Oh, we should go there. Oh, we should go there. Well, somebody's going to have to do enough sale to bring enough value that a decision gets made. So anytime there's a decision, there's basically a sale that's been made.